And you are podcasting with Gary DeMar. Let's figure things out.
Welcome back to Bible Prophecy Under the Microscope. I'm Gary DeMar, president of American Vision. And if you would like more information about the work of American Vision, not just in the area of eschatology, but in Christian worldview, apologetics, and American history, America's Christian history, we have a full range of books on those various topics. And you can go to AmericanVision.org for that. I want to get right into today's topic. And I saw a short, it's actually an audio presentation on the issue of timing and timing in the Bible. And let me see if I can pull this up and so you can listen to it, and then I'll respond to it right after you hear this. It's fairly short.
Say he's coming soon. If it's been 2,000 years since he made the promise, well, if you're 5 years old and you need to get out the door, your mom might say, hurry up and put your shoes on because we're leaving soon. In this context, she means right now. But when you're 15 years old, your dad might say, you better start getting ready for your driver's test because you will be taking it soon. And he means in a few months. But when you're a freshman in high school, your mom might say, you better start taking your classes seriously because you will be going to college soon. And she really means 4 years. So you see, the word soon is relative to the bigness of the event and how much preparation it takes.
I have to say that is a definition of soon and time words in general that I have never heard before. So the word soon is relative to the bigness of the event. Now, it is true, by the way, that soon in particular contexts can mean different periods of time. But every example that this person gave, you pretty much explain and understand the nature of the word soon. If someone is talking about we're going out somewhere, you need to put on your shoes and do it now or do it soon, there's the time frame for which you are dealing with that particular topic. Or if you're going to have to study for your driver's license because you have a test coming up in 2 months, that is soon because you know the time parameter. And then if going off to college, soon takes on a little broader context. But to say that when the Bible uses phrases like near, soon, quickly, at hand, about to, that we can stretch those time indicators over 2,000 years is just outside of any rational thought regarding how the Bible uses those phrases. You could never understand what the Bible was saying about anything if the word soon or near or quickly meant possibly 2,000 years. What is happening with that is in the context that this individual said used, but when you're a freshman in high school, your mom might say, you better start taking your classes seriously because you will be going to college soon. And then to transpose that on the Bible, and then when the Bible uses the phrase, this thing will take place soon, now we're talking about 2,000 years? Absolutely not. The New Testament, when it uses words like soon, near, quickly, and shortly, when you compare them with every other use of those words in other contexts, they pretty much mean what you and I know they mean in typical speech. And let me give you an example of the opposite of this. This is in John's Gospel, John chapter 5, beginning with verse 1. And after these things, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porticos. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, and withered. And it says here, waiting for the moving of the waters, for an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever then first, after the stirring up of the water, stepped in was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. And a certain man was there who had been 30 years in the sickness. So here's 30 years. Actually, 38 years in his sickness. Now look at verse 6. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been a long time in that condition, he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" So here we have something of a definition of what a long time is, and that is 38 years. And the same thing I think you could say when you get to words like soon, shortly, and quickly. 40 years is a long time. And we could also say that 2,000 years is a whole lot longer in terms of time. And it seems to me that if the New Testament wanted to indicate that these time indicators could be relativized to mean 2,000 years, I think we would have heard something about that. I don't believe that's the case at all. The New Testament is very clear that Jesus predicted that he would return in some capacity before their generation passed away. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24:34. And then to do kind of an internal evaluation of what this generation means, what you need to do is to see how this generation is used elsewhere in Matthew's gospel. And every time this generation is used in Matthew's gospel, it always refers to the generation to whom Jesus is speaking. Do the study for yourself. It cannot, the Greek word genia cannot mean race. It's a different Greek word. It can't mean, well, you can put that to the test very easily. Go to Matthew chapter 1, verse 17, and plug in the word race where you see the word generation, or the plural, I think it's called, it's generations. It just doesn't fit. It's the wrong Greek word. And you can't, say that this means, well, what Jesus meant was the generation that sees these signs will not pass away until all these things take place. Now look what you had to do there. You had to get rid of the phrase this generation, and then you had to substitute the generation. Then you had to add the generation that sees these signs will not pass away. See what you have to do to the text of Scripture in order to make it say what you want it to say. And there's an interesting history behind all of this, because liberals, when they looked at the Bible and they saw all of the time indicators in Scripture, and by the way, there are more than 100 time indicators in Scripture that tell us that there was a prophetic event surrounding the judgment coming of Jesus before that generation passed away. And what liberals have done to say, oh, Jesus was mistaken about all of that. And all those, and those who then try to kind of apologize for what Jesus was actually saying, they make up things. Like what this individual has made up about, oh, we've relativized the word soon to mean, could mean 2,000 years. But liberals had caught on to the time indicators and how Christians have argued with those over the years and have done a pretty good job of critiquing those time indicators. I'll give you an example of how this was used in a debate between Christopher Hitchens, who was an atheist, and Douglas Wilson, who was a Christian pastor. And Christopher Hitchens brought up Matthew chapter 24. We're here, wars and rumors of wars, false prophets, great tribulation, the gospel being preached in the whole world. You go on, famines, earthquakes, and all that. And Hitchens comes up and says, well, Jesus was obviously wrong because he did not come to that generation. And Doug Wilson, it took him 90 seconds at the most to say, no, you're missing the biblical approach to these things. Jesus was actually quoting passages from the Old Testament that applied to judgment comings. Wasn't talking about the physical appearing of Jesus. He was talking about the coming of Jesus in judgment on clouds, and you can find those in prophecies, Isaiah chapter 19, verse 1, where Jehovah is said to have come on clouds to Egypt, and the idols trembled at his presence. The idea of coming and the sun, moon, and stars language that you find in Matthew chapter 24 is all borrowed from the Old Testament. And any Jew at that time who understood the scriptures would have understood Jesus was describing his own judgment coming against Jerusalem that took place before that generation passed away. And the thing is, Christopher Hitchens did not have an answer for that. And if this particular fellow who's kind of relativizing the word soon had been in that debate, Christopher Hitchens would have just eaten him up, because Hitchens knew his Bible very, very well. But it was because Christopher Hitchens had heard those kinds of arguments about the coming of Jesus and how those have been relativized to say, well, Jesus really didn't mean he was going to come in that generation. He didn't really mean that soon was soon for them. The liberals took advantage of this. And here's a good example of this. This is by a professor named James Tabor, and he said the prophecies of Jesus and his followers all came to nothing. And the reason he said that is because Jesus promised to come within that generation, and he didn't come. Therefore, Jesus was mistaken. And he goes on to say, John the Baptist, Jesus, James, Peter, and Paul all lived and violently died with the imminent hope, see, the soon hope of cosmic reversal on their lips. That is the sun, moon, and stars language, which is borrowed from the Old Testament and is symbolic in Isaiah chapter 13 of judgment of nations. Sun goes dark, moon goes dark, stars fall. That's a symbolic representation of judgment. Those passages really, they did not mean that the sun was actually going to go dark and the moon was going to go dark and stars were going to fall from heaven and hit the earth. That's not what it meant in the Old Testament. It's not what Jesus meant in Matthew chapter 24. So back to Tabor, John the Baptist, Jesus, James, Peter, and Paul all lived and violently died with the imminent hope of cosmic reversal on their lips, but what they most expected to happen never came about. So what are we to make of this disappointment and failure? With Schweitzer, he was a fellow who wrote on the life of Jesus, Albert Schweitzer. He was a physician, worked in Africa and so forth, but he also was a theologian of type, and he wrote on this very issue. And so Tabor writes, with Schweitzer, I see Jesus as a full and willing participant and key agent in these failed apocalyptic hopes and dreams. And then there is this thing from H.H. Rowley, who wrote in his book, The Relevance of Apocalyptic, which came out in 1947. Yet where for more than 2,000 years a hope has proved illusory, we should beware of embracing it afresh. The writers of these books were mistaken in their hopes of imminent, that is, soon deliverance. Their interpreters who believed the consummation was imminent, that is, soon or near, in their day proved mistaken, and they who bring the same principle and the same hopes afresh to the prophecies will prove equally mistaken. And so here you see what liberals have done. They've gone to the New Testament. They've seen what the New Testament had to say about the soon coming of Jesus, and on the basis of that, Jesus was mistaken. Now, kind of a funny thing about all this is, before I move on to some texts that deal with the soon coming of Jesus, which I believe the Bible is accurate. Jesus promised to come soon. His time was near for his coming, and he did in fact do that, just like he prophesied he would. Because the same liberals who evaluate the imminent coming of Jesus and say Jesus is mistaken also believe that the New Testament books of the Bible were written late in the first century and possibly into the second century, which would mean, why didn't they change Jesus's mistakes? Why didn't they go in there and just completely change this? Why perpetuate something that was false and cast doubt on the Bible? No one ever really asks that question. The reason I believe all the New Testament books were written before the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. It made perfect sense because Jesus had predicted that his coming would in fact be related to that generation. We know that the temple was destroyed just like Jesus said it would be destroyed. Not one stone here will be left upon another. That took place in AD 70 when the Romans came in and went to war against the zealots of that time and ended up destroying the city and even burning the temple area. Let's look at a couple of passages. One is from the book of James, chapter 5, verse 7. Now, notice the audience here. This is James's first audience, or the people he first wrote to. We're a secondary audience. We're looking at this from the height of 2,000 years. So keep in mind, when he says, be patient, therefore, brethren, he's talking about them, the brethren to whom he's writing this particular letter. Be patient, therefore, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. Behold, the farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it until it gets the early and late rains. You too be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near at hand. Do not complain, brethren, against one another, that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. So here you have James saying, hey, this is comparable to what a farmer does. The timing on all of this is similar to that. A farmer would not plant something in the ground and think that near meant 2,000 years. He knew what agriculture was all about and what happens to crops when you plant something in the ground. So if this analogy holds, then we understand that near is something that was near. How near? Jesus said in Matthew 24:34, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So the nearness of it all had to take place within that particular generation. And as that generation was passing away, what you find with that is that it was getting nearer. And it's possible that you find that James was writing closer to that time. They didn't know the day nor the hour, as Jesus mentioned in Matthew chapter 24. And what's interesting, 2 Peter chapter 3, Peter writes, I know this, first of all, that in the last days, see, the last days of what you have to ask, the last days of that old covenant order that Jesus said was coming to an end. Know this, first of all, that in the last days, mockers will come with their mocking, following after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? See, this is the same thing that the liberals place upon the Bible. Where is this promise of Jesus' coming? And why would these mockers say that? Because the mockers knew what Jesus had said about the predicting that the temple was going to be destroyed. In their day, the temple was still standing, in fact, more glorious than it had ever stood before. And so this temple was probably in the AD late 50s or early 60s, and it's still standing, and that generation is about to pass away. And within a few years, guess what? The temple was destroyed just like Jesus said it would be destroyed. And so here you find the timing factor in Scripture, the nearness of things. In fact, if you go 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 7, Peter writes, the end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be of sound judgment and sober spirit for the purpose of prayer. And above all, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaint, and each one has received a special gift. Employ it in serving one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Now, this is important because when people like these liberals read these passages and say that they were expecting some cosmic as well as some revolutionary physical change on earth with the coming of Christ, you don't find that anywhere in the New Testament. They were not expecting a revolutionary change in things. They were expecting a heart change in people. That was the essence of the gospel. They were not warning them to be raptured out, to be taken off the earth. You won't find that anywhere in the New Testament. I know there are passages that people turn to for that, but that is not what the New Testament is dealing with, and I'll have to discuss that at a different time. I do discuss this in my books, Last Days Madness and Prophecy Wars, where I discuss some of the passages where people think that there is going to be people are going to be taken off the earth before all hell breaks loose in something called the Great Tribulation. That's just not the case. The expectation of the gospel was to go into all the world, make disciples of all the nations, to renew the world in terms of the gospel. And so you don't hear anything here about a revolution that's going to take place. You don't hear about the world going to be destroyed, although you go to 2 Peter chapter 3, and it talks about the world being burned up and so forth. But again, that particular language is indicative of language found in the Old Testament and the New Testament about the passing away of the heavens and the earth, which was a covenantal passing away. And to give you evidence for that, if you go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, Jesus says, "Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass away from the law until all is accomplished." So here you have Jesus saying, first off, he did not come to abolish the law and the prophets. Jesus fulfilled every aspect of the law and the prophets. You can go to Luke chapter 24, where Jesus takes his disciples, post-resurrection disciples, and it says, I'm going to show you everything in the Old Testament to the lead up to me, and I am the fulfillment of all that. But if the case here is the physical heavens and earth being passing away, and that the physical heavens and earth have not passed away, then we are supposed to be following every jot and tittle of the law. But if the passing away of heavens and earth here is the passing away of the old covenant heavens and earth, then you can see this in Isaiah chapter 65 and 66, where heavens and earth is being used there to describe the old covenant order. And there's a new covenant, a new heavens and earth. Look at Spurgeon. Look up let me see if I can find this and read what Spurgeon had to say about the heavens and the earth, the passing away of the heavens and the earth. First, Spurgeon said, "The destruction of Jerusalem was more terrible than anything the world has ever witnessed, either before or since. Even Titus seemed to see in his cruel work the hand of an avenging God." In a 1865 sermon, here's what Spurgeon said: "Did you ever regret the absence of the burnt offering or the red heifer or any of the other sacrifices and rites of the Jews? Did you ever pine for the Feast of Tabernacle or the dedication? No, because though these were like the old heavens and earth to the Jewish believers, they have passed away, and we live under a new heavens and a new earth, so far as the dispensation of divine teaching is concerned. The substance is come, and the shadow has gone, and we do not remember it." So in order to understand all of this, we have to understand the Bible's use of terms and phrases. And I would just suggest on the time indicators like shortly and near and quickly is that you do your own study. Get a concordance out, look up every use of near, shortly, and quickly in Scripture, and see how they are used in other contexts. And why would they change from one context to another? Certainly, if God had in mind something that wasn't going to take place for 2,000 years or longer, seems to me they would have made some indication that that's what was going to take place. The Bible over and over and over again describes Jesus' coming that was soon. It was about to take place. Their generation would not pass away until all these things took place. And I'll give you a couple more passages from Matthew's gospel. Jesus sent his disciples out, his apostles, 2 by 2, in verse 5 of chapter 10 of Matthew. These 12 Jesus sent out after instructing them, saying, "Do not go into the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter any city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." And look at down verse 23. "But whenever they persecute you," now he's not talking about persecuting us, the you is them, but whenever they persecute you in this city, flee to the next, for truly I say to you, you shall not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. Now, what are we to make of that? If 2,000 years, are they still going through the cities of Israel? They are not. They went through the cities of Israel, and read the book of Acts, and you will find that indeed they went through the cities of Israel, and they went through the inhabited earth at that time, the Roman Empire. They understood what was going on here, that Jesus would come before that took place. And Jesus came in judgment against that generation before most of the apostles had died. Actually, he came before most of the apostles probably have died, if history is anything to tell us about it. If you go to Matthew chapter 16, verses 27 and 28, "For the Son of Man is going to come," actually, let me read it literally, "For the Son of Man is about to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and will then recompense every man according to his deeds." Quotation again from the Old Testament. "Truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here," meaning there, "then, who shall not taste death until they," not us, "see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." And so you can see why liberals, when they look at this and the way Christians understand the nature of the coming, Jesus was mistaken. He was not mistaken. He was clear as a bell. He was going to come before that generation passed away. If this messes with your eschatology, that's not a bad thing. Search the scriptures daily to see whether these things are so.
Thanks for podcasting with Gary DeMar. Please subscribe and share this with anyone you think really needs to hear it.